John, I'm afraid, is still recovering from that broken hip of his, so this week I'm manning the shop for him. And joining me this afternoon will be the former Conservative candidate, blogger and LBC radio presenter, Iain Dale, and the Labour activist and enthusiastic tweeter, Sally Bercow. Iain, it's been an extraordinary week, very up and down. We began quite badly for David Cameron, told late about the cargo bomb plot, then criticised for giving too much money, in the eyes of some, to the European Union budget, criticised for giving prisoners the vote. Then suddenly the Oldham decision came along and Labour had one of its election results overturned. Then suddenly the pendulum swung back again and Andy Coulson had emerged, had been interviewed by the police. And then this morning, you know, it's all guns blazing from the government, just we're going to reform welfare and we're going to make long-term unemployed do community work. What are we supposed to make of this kind of sort of extraordinary week?
Well, that's politics for you, isn't it?
A week's a long time.
A week is a long time, and it's a fast-moving world that we live in. I think that the biggest story of this week was probably the Phil Willis exclusion from Parliament. And I think that's unfortunate in many ways, because I think the electorate should decide who goes into Parliament and who's excluded, not a court. And I think there's some very worrying precedents set by this decision. What he said in his campaign leaflets was disgusting. I think everybody can agree with that. But for the Liberal Democrats to complain about that, when those of us that have been on the receiving end of Liberal Democrat election campaigns, I mean, you do have to wonder where this will lead to.
So do you agree, Sally, with Harriet Harman's decision to ask the Electoral Commission to look at this whole issue and say, look, there is a genuine issue here?
I think there is a genuine issue here. I mean, I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of the court supplanting the verdict of the electorate. I mean, Phil Willis practised, you know, it was sharp practice in his election campaign. There's no doubt about that.
Sorry, no,
well,
it was illegal.
racist.
It was illegal.
Yeah.
It was against the law. I mean, you know, it broke the law, didn't it?
He hasn't committed any criminal offences at all.
But he broke election rules.
He broke an election rule, but he hasn't been voting. He hasn't been rigging ballots or anything like that, which is what this.
Well, effectively, I suppose you could argue that's what it led to. But I did laugh this morning when I heard Harriet Harman on Andrew Marr saying that Andy Coulson should stand down because he's been interviewed by the police. I don't remember her saying that Phil Willis shouldn't be brought back to the Labour front bench a month ago.
In the context of this, it has been quite a rough week for David Cameron. Sally, one question is, where is Labour in all of this? Because in the past we've always had, the media loves this idea of the worst week ever for a particular league. And there are lots of things that's happened that in a different context, Labour could have really made inroads against the Conservatives. And we don't seem to have got much sense of that this week.
Well, I think Miliband's made a really good start, but there is no doubt that the Labour Party do need to up their game a bit, I think, and particularly in terms of our alternative policies.
Iain, what about the Conservative right? Are they restless about some of these things?
Well, I think one or two people on the right are restless about what happened with the European budget. But I think Ed Miliband's position is quite interesting. He's on paternity leave at the moment, so in a sense, he's not going to figure in the news a lot. But Ian Duncan Smith once said, and he should know, you have 90 days to establish yourself as a leader. And you have a narrative to build. Now, I heard someone yesterday on the radio referring to Ed Miliband as Little Ed Miliband. Well, if he starts getting that, if he starts being seen as Little Ed Miliband, he's got a real problem, because we all remember Neil Kinnock, the Welsh windbag, the problems that John Major had, the problems that all the different Conservative leaders had in opposition.
People were writing off David Cameron at the very beginning.
Oh, I'm not writing him off at all. I actually have a lot of time for Ed Miliband, but I do think he hasn't got that much longer to make his mark.
Well, Iain, why shouldn't there be a coalition candidate at the moment in this rerun election?
Well, because it is a general election rerun, so I would have been astonished if there had been a coalition candidate. I think the parties are quite right to have separate candidates, give the electorate the choice that they want.
But we're not electing a new parliament. This is just an election, and whichever MP is elected basically have to make a decision. Do they support the coalition or not? So why not perpetuate this coalition to its logical conclusion?
Well, I don't think there was ever any intention of having coalition candidates in by-elections, election reruns, or indeed at the next general election. There are people in the Conservative Party who think there ought to be a pact at the next election, but we're 5 years away from that now.
Now, there's obviously a big decision to be made by the Speaker about whether or not this election should be held sooner rather than later, or should they wait for MP. Well, I just wondered if there's anybody in the House here who perhaps had some sort of insight into perhaps what announcement we get from the Speaker tomorrow.
I have no insight at all. I have my own opinions,
What is your own opinion in this case, as an independent person? What's your view?
Independently, I think that tomorrow the Speaker is going to have to announce what happens next to the House. However, it's going to depend when the by-election writ is moved. I mean, Phil Willis is going for judicial review. And it depends how long that judicial review will take.
What would you like him to say? Go or wait?
I would like him to hold off until Phil Willis has had a chance to have his judicial review.
There is a precedent on this. There have been by-elections which have been held later pending the outcome of legal proceedings. It was a bit of a different case previously. I think there ought to be a by-election as soon as possible, or the election rerun as soon as possible, because the electors of Oldham deserve a representative.
But then you'll end up with two MPs if Phil Willis is cleared.
Well, a judicial review can't necessarily clear him, as I understand it, and I'm not sure whether he will do this because he hasn't got the backing of the Labour Party, and it's going to cost a lot of money.
Sally, you still think that, you know, Phil Willis, he's always been hard done by if he's thrown out immediately. If the process should wait until his appeal has been heard.
I don't think the people of Oldham should be without a candidate and without an MP for more than a couple of months. Certainly not. But I do think Phil Willis has got the right to appeal, and for that appeal to be heard.
But judicial reviews can take months sometimes.
But they can also, I mean, we don't know what the court's going to say. I mean, it could be done in 2 months.
Obviously, Danny Alexander was talking a great deal about...
The whole thing's a mess.
Oh.
Totally.
Then presumably you support Harriet Harman saying this morning that the Electoral Commission should look at it.
Indeed,
And what about you, Iain?
Well, the Electoral Commission is there to look at things like this. I think it is an old law. The last time this happened was 100 years ago, so I guess there is a case for reviewing it.
But old laws aren't necessarily bad.
No,
but
no,
they didn't have
absolutely
appeal
not.
systems built into them.
Very quickly, on welfare. Do you like them? Do you like these ideas, Iain?
Well, I do, and I think 95% of the British public will like them, because it seems to me that if there are generations of people who've never experienced work, this is a good way of them getting back into the idea of going to work.
Very briefly, Sally.
No, I don't like them at all. I think it's deeply patronising to the unemployed to assume that they're sitting around all day watching daytime television and not looking for a job. And the real problem is there aren't jobs out there.
Well, that's just not true. There are an increasing number of jobs for people to go to. Even Diane Abbott this morning has given it a welcome, so I don't know why you can't.
Has she?
She has, indeed. On a rival channel.
There we go. There's no talk of rival channels. Iain Dale, thank you very much. Indeed, also Sally Bercow.